Leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. So we all are leaders because we all influence somebody in our lives, right? Can you think of somebody you influence? Family member, coworker, clients. So we all have influence. And the first law for John Maxwell's leadership laws is the law of the lid. This is where we're going to raise your lid. So the law of the lid says that your overall effectiveness will never be any higher than your leadership level. So if your leadership level is a 5, then your overall effectiveness will never be greater than a 5. Because leadership is the lid on your personal and professional effectiveness. So if you raise your lid, you can imagine that you would exponentially raise your overall effectiveness. And you raise your lid in increments, right, throughout your life. So it's when we learn things, when we take on new information, when we adapt to current situations, our leadership lid rises. So what I want to share with you this morning are a couple of things that have helped me raise my lid throughout my years of experience. And the first one I want to share is around conscious communication. So I always thought that I was a pretty good communicator, but I think that I was, like most of us, on autopilot a lot of the time. Do you know what I mean by that? Where you just go through life not really thinking about this magical art of communication and being fully conscious when you're in it. It's that missed opportunity in the car when you're driving your children to school and you take a cell phone call instead of being in relationship. It's the way we walk through our life in this sort of autopilot mode. My famous one is having a long conversation while I'm driving and forgetting how I got home, right? Because I was on autopilot. And so conscious communication says to us, look, there's 3 principles that you can practice that'll help you bring more consciousness to your communication. The first one is awareness. So can you imagine an iceberg? What do we know about icebergs? Bigger at the base. The part that we don't see, that's invisible to us, is the largest part of the iceberg. So just like in communication, right, 90% or 10% of what we hear, data, words, 10% is content. 90% is context. That's what gives the meaning to the words. Those are the things we can't see. We don't hear because it's underneath the surface. But it brings a lot of information to our awareness when we're in communication with somebody. So if I walked in one morning to BNI and I was not my normal self, you know, my energy was off, I was maybe a little withdrawn, you know, maybe I looked tired, that's context that I'm carrying in with me. Now you could interact with me and you could think, wow, she's not very friendly today. Or you could give me the benefit of the doubt because now you know there's context. So context allows us to give others the benefit of the doubt when we're in communication and relationship with them, which is huge, right? Second piece is perspective. Can I see from another person's point of view? My vantage point needs to be different, which means I put myself in Jeri's shoes and I say, wow, maybe there's something else going on, because I guarantee you, you never know the whole story. You don't know the whole story. Even when you think you know the whole story, you don't know the whole story. So there's a man on a subway, and he was tired, end of a long day, and on came a man and his 3 children. And those 3 children were out of control. They were running up and down the subway, they were screaming, they were talking, they were laughing, and the man was just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. And finally the man, who was so frustrated with the situation, got up and said, I can't believe that you're not controlling your children. What is the matter with you? And he said, I'm sorry, my wife just died in the hospital. We're on our way home and I am just lost. So we pass a judgment based on what we see because we don't know the whole story. Perspective allows us to step back and say, could I see this from a different vantage point? The third principle is, that's really good, Jeri. The third principle is, oh, for heaven's sakes, choice. That's the most important one, choice. So ultimately, I talk about this all the time. Ultimately, we have to choose. We have to choose to be conscious in our communication. Because we can know all this information, but we have to choose every day when we interact with somebody to be conscious or to be on autopilot. And whether you think you consciously choose or not, you do choose. I've learned so much in my communication with my son of 19. So I'm busy doing something. He comes home. I'm washing the dishes. He says, "Hey, Mom, how are you?" "I'm fine." Right? How was your day?" He says, "Fine." I go, go ahead, keep talking. I'm listening." I'm not listening. So I turn, I say, "Hey, I need 5 minutes, but I really want to hear about what's going on with you." But I had to learn this, and I'm not good at it every time, but ultimately I know in the back of my mind what has progressed my ability to influence others is to be in conscious communication with them. And I want to give you some tips for climbing the ladder to better listening. L stands for
looking.
Look at the speaker. Meanings are in the words, not in the words, but in the people. The context, right? That 90%. Meanings are in the people, not the words. A stands for ask questions. This is the quickest way to become a listener. When I thought networking was all about selling myself, I really struggled. I didn't know better. I got this great book, Endless Referrals, and he said, look, there are 10 feel-good questions. Ask them, and they're all about the other person. Well, I can listen to someone else talk all day long, and I'm actually doing better at networking than if I were talking about myself. So asking questions is really, really important. D stands for don't interrupt. It's rude to step on people's ideas as it is to step on their toes. And sometimes we interrupt because we think we know what they're going to say, or because we are busy thinking about what we're going to say and we want to get it out. D stands for don't change the subject. Listening is wanting to hear. So my husband is a computer guy. He loves to talk about his technology, and I have 0, -5 interest in technology. And I'll say to him, God, please tell me people drama story, like I'm all over that. But so I have to really practice this one, because I tend to change the subject on him because I'm not interested and I'm trying, right, to interact. So I have to really practice, and I have to practice asking questions, because the more questions I ask, the more he talks about it. So, but he feels heard and appreciated and understood when I do that, because that's his world. E stands for emotion. Check your emotions. Leaders must keep current of the undercurrents. Emotions create storm and others will back away. We've all known people that were emoting, right? Really pingy and unpredictable, and we just kind of go, "Rrr." So if we're having emotions about something, we just need to check them and figure out where that's coming from. R stands for responsive. Responsive listening. When people feel that their leaders no longer listen or respond, they'll go somewhere else. Now, I want to end with a story because this is probably one of the most important learnings that I have had in my leadership journey, which is to not take myself too seriously. And I used to spend hours beating myself up over them, and now I'm like, you know what? No, this is part of who I am, right? It gives me great stories to tell when I'm speaking, and we all make mistakes. We all do things that we go, oh my God, I wish I could suck that back in, right? But that's just how it works. So our ability to know that we're not perfect, don't pretend we're perfect, be vulnerable with other people, share what you're learning, because that's how other people learn too. It's our willingness to be vulnerable that really makes a difference between a good leader and a great leader. So this is what I do. I help people raise their lid. I talk about things, practical tips and tools and techniques that they can apply to be better and more effective in their life right where they're at. So thank you for indulging me this morning.